At 6:12 a.m., rain ran in thin silver veins down the corrugated roof of the Queen's Wholesale Flower Market, dripping through one bent seam and tapping the edge of Rose Lee's work table like a clock she could not silence. She stood with wet cuffs and numb fingers, counting crumpled $1 bills beside an overdue rent notice stamped "Final Warning," an unpaid pharmacy invoice for her mother's cardiac medication, and a cheap phone with 12 missed calls from Dorian Cade stacked in a red column that made her stomach tighten each time the screen lit. Across the aisle, men in insulated jackets shouted prices over buckets of imported stems she would never bring home. She smoothed the rent notice flat with the heel of her hand and did the number again because panic made arithmetic slippery. $483 in cash from tips and small freelance arrangements. $1,800 due by Friday for rent and late fees. $216 for the pharmacy. Due immediately because the last refill had already been split into halves to make it stretch. Her mother's next cardiology follow-up sat on a folded appointment card tucked into her wallet like a threat. The market smelled of wet cardboard, cold metal, bruised leaves, and the sweet rot of petals trimmed too late. "Rose, table 3 is behind." Her supervisor called from the loading lane without looking at her. The Midtown Hotel added 12 centerpieces. Same palette, same vase. They need photos by 8. She lifted her chin. "I'm on it." "Also fix your hem," he added, glancing at the stitched edge of her black work dress. "Client reps are doing a walk-through at 9. She looked down at the hand-sewn seam where it had torn on a crate latch last week. The thread was matte and visible if anyone cared enough to judge it. People in this industry always cared. She set the bills aside, slid the notices under her backpack, and reached for Florist wire with wrists that had been throbbing since yesterday's double shift. By 6:40, her left hand had already gone stiff from twisting stems tight against damp tape. Rows of peonies, lisianthus and spray roses blurred at the edge of her vision while she worked. She built each arrangement in practiced sequence, hands steady even when her shoulders shook with hunger. Strip leaves, trim ends, cross stems, bind, rotate, adjust negative space, check line balance, repeat. The centerpieces were for a contract signing luncheon in Midtown, all ivory and pale blush, floating candles, low crystal bowls, a look called understated elegance that cost more than her rent in a single table setting. She wired petals she could name by farm and season, but had never bought for herself, not even on birthdays, not even once. At 7:18 a.m., her phone buzzed again inside her apron pocket. Unknown number, then immediately Dorian's name, then another unknown number 2 minutes later. She didn't answer. She had learned that silence angered him, but answering gave him rhythm, and rhythm gave him control. Her throat closed anyway, memory moving through her body faster than thought. His smile in public, his hand clamping too tight in private, apologies shaped like orders. She turned the phone face down on a crate and kept threading the wire through damp stems until the vibration stopped. Nina from packaging slid beside her with a stack of ribbon cards and a cup of vending machine coffee that smelled burnt enough to clear paint. "You look like you slept in a freezer," Nina said softly. "Take this." Rose accepted it with a nod. The paper cup warmed only her fingertips. "I'm fine." "You always say that." "I am standing, so technically accurate." Nina huffed out a quick laugh and lowered her voice. "Landlord again?" "Landlord. Pharmacy? Utility bill? Pick a genre." "Talk to me after lunch. I know someone who can help with rent grants." Rose shook her head before the offer could settle. "Those lists take months. I need Friday money." Nina watched her for a beat, then tapped the ribbon stack against Rose's wrist. "Then drink that coffee before it turns to mud, and stop carrying all of this by yourself." Rose wanted to answer with something warmer, but the order printer screamed from the front desk and swallowed the moment. By 8:55, the market lanes were loud enough to rattle the aluminum door frames. Pallets squealed over wet concrete. Freight radios crackled in clipped bursts. A buyer from Manhattan argued over Dutch hydrangeas, while two apprentices sprinted past with dripping buckets. Rose moved through it all with automatic precision, inventory clipboard in one hand, floral shears clipped to her pocket, coat still damp at the shoulders where the rain had soaked through. She had been awake for 21 hours if she counted the nights she spent at the emergency clinic with her mother's chest pain, and the dawn shift she had taken anyway, because missed hours meant missed groceries. Her mother texted at 9:07. Took morning pill. Don't worry, eat something. Rose stared at the message until the letters softened. She typed back, working. We'll call it noon. Love you. She added a heart, deleted it, added it again, then shoved the phone away before she could see if another call from Dorian had slipped into the thread. Hunger carved a bright, hollow ache under her ribs. She chewed a stale granola bar from her bag while wrapping 12 matching bouquets for a broker event she would never attend, catching her own reflection in the steel cooler door. Hair pinned too fast, concealer failing under her eyes, jaw set hard enough to hurt. At 10:30 a.m., the rain intensified, drumming against the loading dock roof so hard that speech turned to hand signals. Water crept in under the back door and gathered around the wheels of stacked flower carts. Rose knelt to move a box of votive holders and felt a sharp pull along her wrist tendons. A clean warning that one more week like this would force a choice she could not afford between rest and rent. She stood anyway, flexed her fingers, and returned to table 3 because the Midtown hotel coordinator had sent a second email marked urgent, asking for replacement stems with stronger visual discipline. Visual discipline, Rose murmured to herself, clipping a bent stem. Sure. The coordinator arrived in person at 11:05, dry under an umbrella held by a junior assistant. She scanned the finished pieces with a narrow smile. These are acceptable, she said. Make sure delivery includes ivory peonies only. Not cream, not blush, ivory. Rose kept her tone even. Confirmed. Ivory peonies, silver dust Miller accents, clear low bowls. The woman nodded at Rose's wet sneakers, amended hem as if taking inventory of deficiency. Good. We can't have surprises with this client. After she left, Rose stood very still, fingers wrapped around the stem cutter until the metal edge bit her palm through the glove. The market's fluorescent light made everything look colder. The steel racks, the puddles, the zip ties, even the petals. She forced her hand to unclench, packed the centerpieces, labeled each box in block letters, and stacked them for courier pickup. At 11:42 a.m., her manager, Pavel, appeared beside the loading calendar with a tablet in one hand and a cigarette tucked behind his ear. Change of plan, he said. Courier got diverted. You're taking an emergency bouquet to Pellegrini Tower. Contract signing luncheon, top floor private dining. Rose blinked. I'm on finishing and inventory till 2. Not anymore. They called direct. Fast turnaround, premium fee. You go now. She glanced at the schedule board. Who's handling my stations? Nina and Jorge will patch it. Pavel's gaze dropped to her shoes. Try not to look like you walked through a storm drain. She looked down at the dark waterline across the canvas and swallowed what rose to her tongue. What bouquet? Prepped in cold room C. Tagged priority. Deliver by hand, get signature, leave. No lingering. He started to turn away, then paused. And if your phone keeps vibrating like that, mute it. Clients notice. She did not answer until he was already halfway down the aisle. Then she set her shears down carefully, wiped her hands on a towel that smelled of bleach and stem sap, and walked toward cold room C with her pulse ticking too fast. Inside the cooler, the air struck her skin like a slap. Breath fogged in front of her face. Buckets lined both walls in neat ranks, stems lifting from the water like thin green bones. On the steel prep bench waited a boxed arrangement wrapped in matte black paper to protect the bloom heads from rain, with a delivery envelope clipped to the handle and her name written in block marker. Rose frowned. Their shop used white wrap for high-end daytime events and craft paper for standard dispatch. Black wrap was usually reserved for evening memorials. She checked the order slip. Pellegrini Tower. Emergency luncheon replacement. Signature required. She reached for the box and felt the weight settle into her forearms, heavier than it should have been for peonies. Maybe extra hydration packs, maybe rushed packing, maybe another detail she would carry and fix and never be thanked for. Her phone buzzed again. Dorian. Then immediately another call. Same name, same bright red icon. She hit mute and pressed the device off entirely, fingers shaking harder than she wanted to admit, then tucked it deep into her bag, beneath the pharmacy bill so she would not see it while she worked. At 11:58, she changed into her least damp coat, retied her hair, and looked at herself once in the cracked mirror by the employee lockers. She saw exhaustion mapped under her eyes, a woman one bad week away from collapse, and beneath that, something stubborn and unspent that had kept her standing through longer nights than this. Keys, delivery papers, transit card. She lifted the boxed bouquet and pushed through the back door into rain that had sharpened to needles, each cold drop a small, relentless reminder that the day was only half over. Rain hit hard enough to sting the back of Rose's neck as she hunched over the boxed arrangement and crossed the loading lane toward Northern Boulevard, her damp sneakers taking in water at every seam. A city bus hissed past, spraying a gray fan across the curb, and she flinched to protect the bouquet before she protected herself. Because that was how this work trained people. Flowers first, body second. She checked the delivery envelope under the streetlight awning, thumb tracing the printed line again. Pellegrini Tower, private dining level, hand delivery required. Arrival by 12:30 p.m. The premium fee Pavel had mentioned sat in the corner like a dare, enough to cover half her mother's pharmacy bill if the client signed without complaint. The subway platform smelled like wet wool and overheated brakes. Rose stood near a tiled pillar, arms tight around the package, watching suited commuters scroll through phones that probably cost more than her monthly grocery budget. Her own phone stayed off in her bag, mute and dark. But she could still feel ghost vibrations in her palm, her nervous system anticipating Dorian and the way skin remembers old burns. When the train arrived, she pressed inside with the bouquet angled high to keep petals from crushing. Shoulders braced against a tide of bodies and umbrella tips. By the time she surfaced in Midtown, the rain had thinned to a cold mist that clung to her lashes and made every polished surface look expensive. Pellegrini Tower rose out of the block in steel and smoked glass, too clean for the weather around it. The front plaza held black cars idling in a quiet line, drivers in tailored coats, umbrellas opening at synchronized intervals. Rose approached the service entrance first, only to find a temporary sign directing all floral deliveries through the main lobby for security verification. She stared at the sign for a beat, then adjusted her grip and stepped toward revolving doors tall enough to swallow her whole. Inside, dry air and citrus polish replaced rain and diesel. Marble floors stretched in pale slabs under crystal sconces, and each footstep she took in soaked canvas shoes sounded like a mistake. A concierge in a charcoal suit looked up from his desk and let his gaze travel from her wet coat to her stitched hem to the black-wrapped box in her hands. The expression was not overtly rude. It was worse, Practiced indifference with a thin edge of amusement. "Deliveries are screened downstairs," he said, crisp and loud enough for two women in silk blouses nearby to hear. "You're in the wrong place." Rose lifted the envelope. "Order says hand delivery to private dining, contract luncheon replacement. Signature required." He took the envelope between two fingers, read it, and arched a brow. "Signor Lucien Moretti's floor has restricted access. Did your dispatcher not explain protocol?" The way he pronounced the name made it sound like a test she had already failed. Rose kept her voice steady. "I was told to deliver by hand." A man in a navy suit waiting at the desk turned slightly, eyes flicking toward her with open curiosity. Another guest followed his glance, then murmured something that ended with "delivery girl" and a soft laugh. Heat crawled up Rose's throat despite the lobby's aggressive air conditioning. The concierge clicked his tongue once. "It's Moretti," he corrected, syllables clipped. "Not more AT. If you're going to announce him, at least do it correctly." He returned the envelope without apology. "Stand to the side. Do not block arrivals." Rose moved to a brass stanchion near the wall, bouquet growing heavier by the minute. She kept her eyes on the elevator bank while executives passed in charcoal and navy and deep green, carrying tablets and umbrella canes, trailed by assistants with lanyards and perfect posture. The contrast was brutal in its precision. Marble under patent leather, water stains spreading across her cuffs. Her right wrist throbbed from the morning's wiring work. Hunger sharpened into a tremor at the base of her spine. A woman with a pearl pin paused near her and gave Rose a smile polished enough to count as kindness from a distance. "Those for the luncheon?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am." "Try not to drip on the rugs. They're antique." Rose swallowed and nodded. The woman walked on before Rose could answer. 12 minutes later, the concierge signaled with two fingers. "Service corridor. Follow the line inlay, wait at the gray door, and do not wander. Someone will collect you." His eyes landed briefly on her shoes again. "And next time, use the freight entrance." She followed the thin black line set into the marble, through a narrowing hallway where guest music faded and mechanical hum took over. The gray door opened into a transition space of brushed metal, utility lights, and security cameras at each corner. A guard scanned her ID, scanned the envelope, scanned the box, then clipped a temporary badge to her lapel with the word "vendor" printed in red block letters. It sat over her heart like a warning sign. At 12:31 p.m., after another wait that felt designed to remind her where she ranked, a junior facilities manager in an immaculate white shirt escorted her to the service elevator without speaking. The silence had weight. Rose shifted the bouquet from one arm to the other and watched the numbers rise in reflected gold over the paneled doors, each floor marking another layer of a world she entered only through back channels. She thought about the pharmacy invoice folded beneath her phone, about her mother splitting tablets in half, about how humiliation kept finding ways to dress itself as procedure. The elevator opened onto a private service vestibule trimmed in dark wood and muted brass. The air was colder here, almost sterile, carrying faint notes of waxed furniture and expensive cologne. A valet stood by a narrow console table with a tablet in hand and an earpiece tucked behind one ear. He looked to be in his 30s, clean-shaven, jacket-buttoned, posture rigid from training. The rigidness cracked the moment he saw the matte black wrapping. His hand shook. It was small at first, just a stutter in his grip around the tablet's stylus. Then a visible tremor that made the stylus tap against glass in uneven clicks. He tried to hide it by setting the tablet down, but Rose had spent years reading micro-signals in customers and supervisors and men who smiled before they cornered you. The valet's pupils widened. His throat worked once. He did not look at the bouquet directly for longer than a second, as if it might register him looking. "Delivery?" Rose said, and heard the thinness in her own voice. "Replacement arrangement for luncheon." The valet took a measured breath and held out both hands. "Set it there," he said, indicating the console table. His tone was neutral, but the words landed too quickly, rehearsed under pressure. "I'll have it transferred. Signature required. I can sign." Rose slid the envelope from beneath the strap and glanced at the order line before she passed it over. "Ivory peonies, silver dust miller, clear bowl." Her fingers went still. Through a gap in the black wrap near the base, where rain had softened tape, she could see petals pressed against the paper. They were not ivory. They were so dark red, they read as black under the corridor lights. A slow, cold wave moved through her chest. She set the box down and opened one corner of the wrap with careful fingertips, just enough to verify, hoping she was wrong. She was not. The arrangement inside was built from black roses, tightly clustered, bound with matte ribbon that did not match her shop's stock, with no florist seal on the stem guard and no sender card in the holder. In this city's event circuits, she had heard enough whispered rules to know black roses at a daytime signing were not a design choice. They were a message. The valet's gaze flicked over her shoulder toward the hallway camera, then to the far door, then back to the flowers. Sweat beaded at his temple despite the cold air. "Close it," he said quietly. "Now." Rose's skin prickled under her coat. "This isn't what was ordered." His jaw tightened. "I said close it." Footsteps passed somewhere beyond the inner door, then faded. The hallway settled into an oppressive hush, the kind that made small noises stand out. The soft buzz in the valet's earpiece, the muted patter of rain against distant glass, the weak rattle of Rose's own breath. She looked up at the camera in the corner dome and had the sudden sensation of being placed, positioned, watched for reaction rather than verified for security. "I need to call my manager," she said. "No phones in this corridor." The valet finally took the envelope, signed with a quick slash, and pressed it back into her hand. His fingers were cold and unsteady. "You were never here longer than 2 minutes. Do you understand?" The phrasing struck her as wrong, too specific, and fear moved in with crisp edges. Rose stepped back from the table, keeping her face blank, trying to decide whether to return to the elevator or ask for a supervisor. The inner door stayed shut. No one came. The valet's attention had fixed on that camera again, not on her, as if he were waiting for permission or punishment. Then a male voice sounded from the far end of the corridor, smooth, polite, and stretched thin with private cruelty she knew in her bones. "Rose," it said, each letter precise. "Have you learned to follow instructions yet?" Her throat closed so fast she could barely swallow. And when she turned, Dorian stood by the shadowed threshold, smiling like they had run into each other by chance. He wore a slate suit that fit too well to be accidental, and held a folded umbrella that had never touched rain. His hair was neat, his jaw smooth, his expression patient in the way that had always terrified her most. Because patience meant he had planned the room and her place in it. The valet looked down at the console, shoulders locked, as if he had become part of the furniture. "Hi, Rose," Dorian said, stepping closer with careful, unhurried strides. "You turned your phone off. That was rude." She took one step back and hit the elevator call panel with her shoulder. "You're not supposed to be up here." "Plenty of people are where they're not supposed to be." His smile widened without warmth. "You should know that by now." The elevator did not open. The indicator stayed dark. Rose pressed the call button again, harder, and heard nothing except the soft buzz of the valet's earpiece. Dorian followed her gaze and gave a small shrug. "Service lifts are on temporary hold," he said. "Security review, I think. Such a strict building, such serious men." She looked at the valet. "Call your supervisor." The valet swallowed. "Ms. Lee, it would be better if you settled your personal matter downstairs." The words landed like a script read under threat. Rose felt cold spread under her skin, despite the corridor's filtered heat. "This is not personal." Dorian tilted his head. "You delivered the wrong flowers to the wrong floor. You tell me what that is." He moved to the console and lifted the wrapped arrangement with a practiced grip, as if he handled flowers every day. For one flashing second, she saw his cufflinks, black enamel over silver, the same pair he had worn the night he told her apologies were debts, and debts were permanent. He set the bouquet back down and plucked at the matte ribbon knot. "Black roses," he murmured. "So dramatic. People might think someone was sending a warning." Rose did not answer. Her pulse thudded in her wrists. She reached for her bag where her phone sat powered off under bills and receipts, then stopped when Dorian's eyes dropped to the motion. "No calls right now," he said quietly. "You and I are correcting paperwork. That is all anyone needs to see." The inner hallway door opened just enough for a staffer carrying polished trays to pass through. He did not look at her. He did not look at Dorian. The door closed again, sealing the corridor back into muted machinery and polished threat. Dorian offered his elbow with theatrical courtesy. "Come on, we'll use the freight route. I'm leaving." He caught her upper arm, not hard enough to draw attention if a camera were watching, hard enough to make her shoulders sting. "You're cooperating." The valet stood rigid, eyes fixed on the camera dome. Rose looked at him one last time, searching for anything human. His mouth tightened, but he did not move. She let Dorian guide her to the service stairwell instead of the elevator, because he had already blocked both direct exits, and she knew the geometry of trapped spaces too well to waste a frantic struggle in a blind corridor. Concrete stairs spiraled down through the building core, each landing lit by pale emergency strips. Her damp sneakers squeaked against painted metal treads. Dorian stayed half a step behind her, one hand on her elbow, steering. When they reached a locked door at the lower logistics level, he flashed a temporary pass card and pushed through into a long service hall lined with storage cages and freight carts. "How did you get access?" she asked. He gave her a glance sharp with amusement. "By asking the right people the right questions." "At what price?" "Rose." His tone stayed soft. "You don't actually want to discuss price in this hallway." They passed a wall clock above a shipping desk. 1:04 p.m. The second hand jerked forward with mechanical indifference. Dorian slowed near a loading manifest board and released her arm just long enough to straighten his cuff. "I'm going to explain what happens now," he said. "You walk with me to the South Bay. You sign a correction statement saying you mishandled a private order and damaged investor property. Then you get into my car and we have a calm conversation somewhere private." Her hands shook. "No." He smiled again, faint and polished. "Your mother picked up medication this morning at 9:02 from Elmhurst Avenue Pharmacy. Last refill on account. The next authorization can disappear in one phone call if forms are flagged for fraud." He watched her face while he spoke, measuring impact. "You don't want those forms flagged." The floor seemed to tilt for a second. He had never needed to shout to hurt her. He preferred details spoken at normal volume, like a banker reviewing terms. Rose forced air into her lungs and kept moving because stillness invited panic. At the logistics checkpoint, Two drivers signed out keys while a janitorial team swapped wet mats. Dorian changed his posture in one smooth shift, stepping slightly ahead of her with his shoulders open, performance mode engaged. By 4:40 p.m., when the weather had turned from rain to a needling sleet and shift traffic thickened at the bay doors, he had walked her through 3 holding corridors and 2 staged delays, keeping her close without ever creating a scene, waiting until there was an audience. The south loading bay was crowded with black sedans, refrigerated vans, and staff in tower uniforms carrying clipboards. Forklifts beeped in reverse. Diesel fumes mixed with cold air. Rose's fingers had gone numb around the strap of her bag. She saw the dark van first. Side door cracked, engine idling, no visible company logo. And then she saw Dorian angle her toward it. He raised his voice just enough for nearby workers to hear. "There she is, the woman who lifted my orchids and tried to pass funeral flowers into a signing floor." Heads turned. A courier paused mid-signature. One of the drivers frowned and looked from Rose's wet coat to the bouquet in Dorian's hand. Humiliation hit like heat under ice, immediate and suffocating. "I didn't steal anything," Rose said, louder than she expected. "That order was forged." Dorian gave a sympathetic laugh, as though she were confused and overtired. "You hear that? Forged. After she signed in on camera and altered materials in restricted space." He gripped her elbow hard enough to bruise and pulled her one step, then another, toward the van. "You owe me inventory losses, Rose. You owe me compliance. You owe me for months of inconvenience. Let go. Keep your voice down." The nearest guard at the bay entrance shifted his stance, but did not intervene, uncertain which hierarchy applied. Dorian lowered his mouth close to her ear, still smiling for the room. "Get in quietly," he whispered. "People disappear after paperwork errors every day. No drama." Rose's vision narrowed at the edges. She could hear the forklift alarms, the slap of sleet against metal, the click of Dorian's watch clasp when he adjusted his grip. On the bouquet, the matte ribbon knot had split where he had tugged it upstairs. Inside the fold, she caught a small glossy square no larger than a thumbnail. An NFC inventory tag, custom encoded for chain of custody orders. Not their shop's standard plastic tab. Tower hardware. That tiny square cut through her fear like a blade of cold logic. She let her knees soften as if she might collapse. Dorian swore under his breath and tightened his hold to keep her upright. Rose grabbed his forearm with her free hand, fingers trembling on purpose, and the bouquet slipped between them. Paper tore with a dry rip. Stems slid. The ribbon snapped fully loose. "Careful," Dorian hissed. "Sorry," she whispered, voice breaking on command. As she bent, she palmed the NFC square with 2 fingers and pressed it under the edge of his watch band when she steadied herself against his wrist. The motion took less than a second. He did not feel it. He was looking at her face, reading fear, confident. She staggered back and dragged her phone from her bag. Screen still black. She powered it with shaking thumbs and opened the Florist dispatch app the instant it loaded, selecting the emergency code Nina had shown everyone after a cargo theft scare last winter. Inventory breach / client premises / live tag attached. One tap sent the alert to shop dispatch and the client security endpoint printed on premium contracts. She hit send without stopping her stride. Dorian saw the phone and lunged for it. She twisted away, clutching it to her chest. "Don't," he snapped, voice still low and pleasant for observers. "You are making this worse. It's already worse." He seized her elbow again and shoved the van door wider. Inside, the bench seat was stripped. floor lined with moving blankets and cable ties tossed in a crate. Not subtle, not deniable. Abduction evidence arranged as utility. Rose dug her heels into wet concrete and shouted, "Help me!" The sound cracked across the bay, and for one suspended beat, no one moved. Then earpieces lit all at once. 3 security officers near the freight desk touched their collars in the same motion. A red indicator above the roll-up gate flashed, and the gate slammed down with a mechanical roar, sealing the lane. Magnetic locks clacked through side exits in rapid sequence. Someone barked over the internal PA. "Protocol Black, South Bay freeze." Dorian's expression broke for the first time. He released her arm and reached for his watch, fingers scraping at the cuff. Too late. A door at the far end opened, and Lucian Moretti crossed the concrete with controlled speed, dark suit untouched by weather, coat open, gaze fixed on Dorian like a verdict. 2 close protection men flanked him. Behind them came the security chief Rose had seen once in trade magazines beside a charity gala photo, now in tactical posture with a tablet in one hand. Lucian's voice carried without shouting. "Stand down and step away from her." Dorian lifted both hands, smile struggling back into place. "Misunderstanding. Private matter. She damaged—" "Silence." The single word cut through forklifts, engines, and murmurs. Rose felt a hand at her back, firm and professional, guiding her 2 steps behind Lucian's right shoulder. Another guard took position at her left, creating a shielded pocket of space. Her knees buckled with delayed shock, but she stayed upright. The security chief spoke fast into his radio. "Medical downstairs. Bay 3. Armored car to service ramp. Sweep that van now. Preserve camera feeds from 12:20 onward. Lock copy to external drive." 2 officers moved on the van with gloves and evidence bags. One photographed the open door, then the crate on the floor, then Dorian's hands. Another scanned Dorian's watch, and the reader pinged. "Live tag confirmed," he said. Dorian's jaw twitched. She planted that. Lucian did not look at him yet. He turned slightly toward Rose, eyes tracking the mark already darkening under her sleeve. "Can you stand?" "Yes." Her voice came out ragged. "Do you need immediate physician care?" "My arm. I'm okay." Lucian nodded once, then faced Dorian. His tone dropped to a low baritone, smooth and stripped of theatrics. "You entered my building on false credentials. You staged a coercive claim on my loading floor. You attempted to remove a witness from secured property." He stepped closer, just enough that Dorian had to tilt his chin to hold eye contact. "She is under my protection now. Do you understand me?" Dorian tried for a laugh and failed. "You don't know who you're stepping into." Lucian's expression did not shift. "Remove him." Officers took Dorian's arms, efficient and unspectacular, turning him toward the secured corridor. He looked over his shoulder at Rose, all polish gone, eyes bright with a familiar, simmering promise. "This isn't finished," he said. Rose met his stare from behind Lucian's shoulder, breath shaking but voice clear. "It is for me." The gate stayed down. Radios kept crackling. Sleet rattled against sheet metal while the evidence team worked through the van in clipped, methodical motions. Lucian held his position until Dorian disappeared behind reinforced doors, then spoke without turning. "Ms. Lee, you're coming with us. Statement first, medical second. You are not to be alone at any point tonight." Rose nodded once, because she could not trust a longer answer. And the guard at her left shifted with her, as Lucian turned toward the secured corridor. The loading bay remained a sealed machine behind them, metal gate down, radios chirping, camera lights blinking red in disciplined sequence. But the moment they crossed the threshold into the internal hallway, The noise flattened into carpeted quiet and controlled light. Her arm throbbed where Dorian had gripped her. Her fingers were still locked around her phone, knuckles white, screen smeared with sleet and sweat. Lucian glanced at it without reaching for it. "Keep that with you," he said. "No one takes her personal device without consent. Digital team works from mirror extraction only." The security chief answered from half a step behind. "Understood." 2 officers on corridor lead, 2 at rear. No open intersections. "Yes, sir." They moved quickly past service doors and coded panels, her wet sneakers leaving faint prints on polished stone that vanished under the next sweep of air from hidden vents. At the first checkpoint, a woman in Navy medical scrubs waited with a rolling kit and a thermal blanket draped over one arm. She stepped forward, eyes on Rose's face first, not the bruise. "Ms. Lee, I'm Mara, on-site medical. May I check your pupils while we walk?" Rose nodded again, and Mara lifted a small penlight, quick and professional. "Any head strike?" "No." "Loss of consciousness?" "No." "Nausea? Blurred vision?" "My arm hurts, and my hands won't stop shaking." "That's expected," Mara said. "You're safe right now. Keep breathing." Lucian did not slow, but he adjusted course toward a private elevator bank where 2 guards already stood posted, shoulders squared toward the hall. One presented a keycard. The other held the door as if timing mattered more than courtesy. Inside, the elevator smelled faintly of cedar and metal polish. No music. No display ads. Just rising numbers and the sound of Rose's breath trying to settle into a rhythm that would hold. At 5:10 p.m., when the doors opened on a restricted executive floor, another team was waiting. A middle-aged woman in a charcoal suit introduced herself as house manager Elena Voss and handed Rose a folded towel and a bottle of water before Rose could ask for either. "Guest suite is secured," Elena said. "Windows alarmed, hall monitored, access list locked. You'll have privacy and a direct line." Lucian gave instructions while walking, clipped and exact. "No staff rotation without my approval. Meals from controlled kitchen only. Log every entry and exit. Legal counsel on standby in conference room B. Financial crimes liaison gets full footage, uncut." Elena nodded. "Already in progress?" "Her workplace dispatch gets confirmation she is safe. Nothing else." "Yes, sir." The suite door opened on warm light, thick rugs, and a sitting area larger than Rose's apartment. But she registered only practical details. 2 exits, 1 camera dome in the outer hall, no visible camera inside, heavy lock plate, phone dock, first aid tray already on the table. Mara guided her to a sofa and knelt to examine her arm. The bruise had darkened into a hard oval at the inside of her elbow. Mara photographed it beside a measurement card, then cleaned a shallow scrape at Rose's wrist where ribbon wire had cut her skin. "This will ache tonight," Mara said, wrapping a cold pack in cloth and settling it against the bruise. "No fracture signs. But I want imaging if pain spikes. Your pulse is fast from adrenaline. Sip water." Lucian stood near the doorway while this happened, jacket unbuttoned, one hand resting against the frame, eyes moving between Rose, Mara, and the guard outside. Presence without crowding. Control without touch. When Mara asked permission to remove Rose's damp coat, Rose hesitated, then nodded. And Lucian looked away until the coat was off and a dry blanket was around her shoulders. "Statement room or here?" the security chief asked from the threshold. Lucian looked to Rose. "Your choice." She swallowed. "Here. I can't do another corridor right now." "Here," Lucian repeated. "Audio and video portable rig. No overhead lights, 1 interviewer only. She gets breaks whenever she asks." Within minutes, a technician brought in a compact recorder and placed it on the coffee table. Then stepped back as a woman with a city credentials badge entered and introduced herself as Detective Lena Ortiz, Financial Crimes Task Force. Her tone was neutral, not soft, not hard. She asked for consent before recording. She asked Rose to begin with her full name, workplace, and the time she first saw the altered bouquet. Rose answered in a voice that shook on the first sentence and steadied by the third. She described the matte black wrap, the missing Florist seal, the valet's tremor, Dorian's voice in the corridor, the locked elevator, the staged accusation at the loading bay, the van's interior, the torn ribbon, the tag. Ortiz listened without interrupting, except to anchor sequence and ask for exact wording where she could remember it. The security chief entered once to hand Ortiz a tablet, then left. Tag data confirms transfer at 4:41 p.m. from bouquet ribbon to suspect watch, Ortiz said, glancing at Rose before she spoke the next part. That move likely preserved the coercion chain. You did very well under pressure. Rose looked down at the cold pack in her lap. Compliments felt slippery in her body, hard to hold. I thought if he got me in the van, no one would see me again. Ortiz did not offer false reassurance. You made sure we had a trail. That matters. The interview lasted 43 minutes with 2 pauses for water and 1 for breathing, when Rose's throat tightened at the phrase correction statement. Each time, no one pushed her to continue until she nodded. When it ended, Ortiz read the key points back and asked for confirmation. Rose signed with a hand that still trembled. As Ortiz packed up, Lucien stepped aside and took a secure call in the hall, voice low. Rose caught fragments through the half-open door. Yes, warrant support. And no media leak tonight? And after a beat, she is not available for comment. When he returned, Elena brought broth, rice, and tea on a tray, with plain dishes, no silver showpiece, no performative luxury. Rose managed a few spoonfuls before nausea rolled, and she set the bowl down. Lucien checked the untouched food, then looked at Mara. Antiemetic? Not unless she requests it. Let her system come down first. He turned back to Rose. Your phone can be cloned now or after you eat. Cloning preserves texts, call logs, app metadata. It does not delete your originals. Rose tightened her grip on the device. You said consent. I did. She stared at him for a long second, measuring whether the promise held under pressure. Do it now. If I wait, I might lose my nerve. A digital analyst entered, sat where Rose could see every movement, and talked her through each step before touching the cable. Mirror extraction, hash verification, read-only capture, estimated 12 minutes. When he finished, he placed her phone back into her hand, then slid a sealed evidence drive toward Ortiz with signatures from both of them. Chain documented in ink and on camera. No one raised their voice, no one rushed her. The steadiness of it made Rose's chest hurt in a new way, because she had lived so long in crisis that order felt almost unreal. She sat with the blanket around her shoulders and watched professionals move through procedure as if her safety were not a favor, but a requirement. 3 days of fear seemed to collapse into that one realization. By 6:02 p.m., the sweet lights had shifted warmer with the dimming sky, and the edge had gone out of the shaking in her hands. Mara reapplied the cold pack and left instructions with Elena. Ortiz departed for a warrant hearing. The guard detail rotated at the door, shoes quiet on carpet, faces alert. Lucien remained. He stood at the window for a moment, looking over rain-dark rooftops and traffic threading red and white below, then spoke without turning. Dorian mentioned your mother's medication authorization in front of witnesses. That is specific leverage. not random intimidation. I need to know how deep his access goes. Rose held the blanket tighter. If I tell you, does it become one more file in your building? It becomes a line of attack we can cut off. She watched his reflection in the glass. Dark suit, still shoulders, controlled profile. He filed fake insurance corrections under my name months ago. Said he could reverse denied claims when the pharmacy blocked refill timing. At first he did. Then he started attaching conditions. Her voice thinned. Answer calls. Meet him. Sign papers I never got copies of. Smile in public so no one asks questions. Lucian turned then, expression unreadable except for the tension at his jaw. Did he ever get legal power of attorney over your mother's care? No, I never signed that. Good. The word came sharp with relief he did not hide. Then we can unwind the rest. She gave a small, brittle laugh that was not humor. You say that like forms are easy. They are not easy, he said. They are mechanical. Mechanical things can be dismantled. The room went quiet, except for rain tapping the glass. Rose looked at the bruise blooming under the medic wrap and felt old shame rise. The familiar narrative that she should have left sooner, spoken sooner, fought sooner. She pressed her thumb against the edge of the cold pack until numbness replaced the spiral. I stayed quiet because I thought silence bought time for her treatment, she said. Every month I told myself one more refill, one more bill paid, one more week. That is how he kept me. Lucian crossed to the armchair opposite her and sat, forearms on his knees, hands loosely clasped. For the first time since the bay, his voice lost the hard operational cadence. My sister used the same logic. Rose lifted her head. He held her gaze, then looked down briefly, as if selecting words from a place he rarely opened. Years ago, before I controlled this organization, she borrowed money through a man who presented himself as a broker. Clean suit, polite tone, flexible terms. He used public embarrassment as enforcement. Small humiliations first, then social isolation, then leverage through medical access for someone she cared about. Lucian's mouth tightened. By the time we understood the structure, she was trapped in a debt narrative that had nothing to do with money. Rose did not speak. She could feel the weight of what he was not dramatizing. She died after a staged correction meeting, he said. No spectacle, no headline. Just a chain of decisions built to break resistance while preserving deniability. His voice stayed even, but the restraint in it was a living thing. When I heard your statement in the Bay feed, I recognized the method. A long silence settled between them, not empty, not awkward, simply full of two different histories suddenly sharing one room. Rose saw, with a clarity that unsettled her, that his control was not only power, it was architecture built around an old failure he had never forgiven. Orders issued fast because delay had once cost him someone. I'm sorry, she said quietly. He shook his head once. Use your sympathy elsewhere. Use your precision. You changed the board before we entered it. That decision gave us admissible evidence instead of a missing person report. Her throat tightened again, but this time she did not look away. I was terrified. I know. Elena knocked softly and stepped in with a folder. Pharmacy Council on line 1. They confirmed an emergency hold against any third-party authorization changes pending court review. Ms. Lee's mother can collect her next refill with photo ID and a temporary override code. Rose closed her eyes for a second, breath leaving her in a ragged exhale. Thank you. Elena inclined her head and withdrew. Lucian rose. You can call your mother now, from this line. It is encrypted through our switchboard and masked from external trace. Rose hesitated only a moment before dialing. Her mother answered on the third ring, voice thin with fatigue and immediate worry. "Rose, are you at work? I got a strange call from a man saying not to sign anything." "I'm safe," Rose said, pressing the heel of her hand to her eyes. "Listen to me. Don't sign anything from anyone. Your medication is protected. I'm with people handling it." Her mother was quiet then. "Is it him again?" "Yes, but not for long." Lucian moved to the far side of the room while she spoke, giving her distance without leaving. When the call ended, she set the receiver down with deliberate care, as if the line itself were fragile. Outside, rain softened to mist against the glass. Inside, guards held position. Evidence moved through legal channels, and the machinery of protection kept turning with quiet, relentless precision. Rose sat straighter beneath the blanket. Pain still present, fear still real, but no longer alone inside it. A soft chime from the suite phone broke the quiet, and Elena's voice came through the speaker with the same calm precision she brought to every doorway. "Ms. Lee, your co-worker, Nina Alvarez, is on the line from Queens Market. Security verified her through your dispatch records. Do you want the call transferred?" Rose looked at Lucian before she answered, then hated herself for doing it. She pressed her palm against the blanket, grounding. "Yes, please transfer." Nina's voice arrived fast and breathless, market noise humming behind her. "Rose, I've been trying every number they gave me. Are you hurt?" Pavel said legal told him not to ask questions, and that made me ask more questions. Rose let out a shaky breath that almost became a laugh. "I'm bruised, not broken. Tell me where you are. I can't share location right now." A pause. Then Nina lowered her voice. "Is he there? That man from before?" "Yes." Another pause, this one heavy with everything Nina had suspected and never forced Rose to confess. "Okay, listen to me. Dispatch got your breach code at 441. I pulled the server record and duplicated it to an offline drive before Pavel could clean the queue. It's time-stamped, your user ID, building endpoint receipt, all of it. I handed one copy to the detective who came by 10 minutes ago. I kept one sealed copy in my locker in case somebody gets creative." Rose sat straighter, pulse kicking. "You did that? You trained me on backup habits when we got those stolen vase chargebacks last winter. Don't sound surprised." Across the room, Lucian turned his head slightly, clearly listening without pretending not to. Rose met his eyes for 1 second and looked away first. "Nina, thank you. You can thank me by staying alive and by not going anywhere alone ever again." The market din dipped, as if Nina had stepped into the cooler. "Your mother called the shop landline. She was worried because your phone was dark. I told her you were tied up with law enforcement, and she cried for 30 seconds and then asked if you had eaten. So, have you eaten?" "Some broth. Not good enough, but acceptable." Nina exhaled. "I'm here all night if they need work logs or invoices." "They will," Rose said. "And Nina?" "Yeah. If anyone asks at work, you only say this was a security incident and I'm cooperating with investigators." Nina snorted softly. "Look at you giving orders from the penthouse bunker." Rose glanced at Lucian again, at the tailored jacket, the stillness, the guards beyond the door. Not a bunker. More like a controlled weather system. Nina did not laugh this time. "Call me when you can. I mean it." When the line clicked off, the room felt larger and closer at once. Rose set the receiver down carefully, then reached for the soup tray and forced herself through 3 more spoonfuls before her stomach tightened and she stopped. Lucian moved from the window to the armchair opposite her again leaving a measured distance between them. "Your coworker is competent," he said. "She is stubborn," Rose replied. "Competence follows stubbornness in our shop." That redundancy may have preserved evidence. The compliment landed cleaner from him than from almost anyone else, maybe because he did not soften it into comfort. Rose pressed the back of her head into the sofa cushion and watched rain bead on the glass. By 6:30 p.m., the storm had thinned to a fine gray veil over Manhattan, headlights smearing into wet streaks below. Lucian folded his hands. "I need your consent for 2 immediate logistics changes. First, relocation from this suite to a secure residence we control. Second, temporary protective detail for your mother's pharmacy pickups and clinic appointments." Her throat tightened again, for a different reason. "A secure residence run by your people?" "Yes." "Guards at my mother's building?" "Yes." Rose stared at him. "Do you hear how that sounds to someone who just got dragged toward a van?" His jaw shifted, the only sign the words had weight. "Say it plainly." "It sounds like I survive one controlling man to be transferred to another system where I need permission to walk outside." The silence that followed was taut, but not hostile. Lucian leaned forward slightly, voice lower. "You will not need permission. You will need coordination while there is an active threat network. There is a difference. To you. To any court reviewing protective protocol after witness intimidation." Rose looked down at her wrist, where the scrape was taped cleanly, then back up. "And when your protocol clashes with my choices? Then we argue. You still make the choice." Something in her chest eased and resisted at the same time. Fear and pull, suspicion and relief, all tangled until she could not separate one from the other. She noticed the precise way he watched for her reaction and gave her space inside it. She noticed, too, the latent force under his control, the kind that could move men and doors and outcomes in minutes. Both truths stood in the same room. "I don't know how to trust this," she said quietly. "You don't need full trust tonight." His voice stayed steady. "You need enough trust to survive this week." Mara tapped once and re-entered with fresh compresses. "Ms. Lee, your elbow swelling has stabilized. May I recheck grip strength?" Rose nodded. Mara tested both hands, then offered a topical analgesic. When Rose reached for the tube, her fingers slipped. Lucian half rose by reflex, then stopped himself and looked at her instead. "May I?" he asked. The question hung there, simple and non-negotiable in its own way. Rose handed him the tube. He moved to the edge of the coffee table, close enough for her to catch cedar and rain on his coat, far enough that she could pull back. His touch was careful, pressure measured as he spread a thin line of ointment near the bruise without crowding the tender center. "Too much?" he asked. "No." "Too cold?" "It's fine." Her pulse hammered anyway. She hated that her body registered safety and danger through the same acceleration now, that kindness and command blurred at the edges. Lucian capped the tube and set it down, gaze lifting to hers with an unreadable intensity that made her skin prickle. "I will not use your fear as leverage," he said. "Not once." She believed he meant it. She also knew men could mean promises and still fail them under pressure. "Then keep asking before you decide for me." "I can do that." The sweet phone chimed again, sharper this time. Elena's voice came through, tighter than before. "Mr. Moretti, Security Chief Rinaldi requests immediate conference. Detective Ortiz has returned with a legal update concerning Mr. Cade." Lucienne stood at once. "Put him through." Rinaldi's voice filled the speaker. Cade's counsel filed an emergency complaint alleging theft, extortion, and unlawful detention. They are pushing for immediate release and demanding direct contact with Ms. Lee for clarification. He also made a recorded statement claiming she fabricated the tag placement. Rose went cold under the blanket. "He wants me alone in a room again," she said, almost to herself. Lucian's response came like steel laid flat. "Denied." Rinaldi continued. "Detective Ortiz advises a supplemental statement tonight while recall is fresh, plus identification of financial records, if Ms. Lee can provide specifics. Counsel is requesting decision in 20 minutes. Rose looked from the speaker to Lucian, then to the evidence folder on the side table. She heard Dorian's practiced tone in her head, the way he wrapped threats in civility, and for one brief second, old panic started to rise. Then she set the blanket aside. "I'll give the supplemental now," she said. Not in response to him, in response to the record. Lucian studied her face. "You're not obligated tonight." "I know. I'm doing it anyway." She stood, legs unsteady but working. "And I want him on a monitored line if legal permits it. He keeps reframing this as confusion. I want formal no-contact language read into the recording with him present." Rinaldi answered before Lucian did. "That changes leverage. If he speaks after advisement, it strengthens witness tampering exposure." Rose nodded once, then set it up. Lucian held her gaze for a long beat, then inclined his head. "Conference room B, full recording. Counsel and law enforcement present. She sits where she chooses." When they entered the conference room, the contrast hit Rose like a second climate change. Matte walnut table, recessed lighting, soundproofed walls. 2 cameras with recording lights already on. Detective Ortiz sat at one end with a legal pad. A city prosecutor joined by secure video, face crisp on a wall monitor. Rinaldi stood near the door with a tablet. Lucian remained at Rose's right, not touching, a deliberate line of presence. Rose chose the chair nearest the exit and placed both hands flat on the table until the shaking subsided. Ortiz slid a microphone toward her. "This is supplemental interview, 7:02 p.m. Subject Rosemina Lee present with counsel access available, security present, voluntary participation confirmed. Ms. Lee, do you consent to recording?" "Yes." The prosecutor spoke from the monitor. "For evidentiary purposes, Mr. Cade is connected from secure holding with his attorney present. He has been advised this is not a private conversation. Mr. Cade, do you understand?" Dorian's face appeared in a split-screen window, tie loosened, expression composed down to the millimeter. Even through video, Rose felt the old physiological recoil, throat narrowing, palms cooling. He smiled when he saw her, as if this were another corridor and he had all night. "Rose," he said softly, "you look tired." Ortiz cut in. "Address the panel, not the witness." Dorian tilted his head. "Of course." Rose heard her own voice before she felt ready for it, clear and level. "My name is Rosemina Lee. I am making this statement voluntarily. Mr. Cade has no permission to contact me directly, indirectly, socially, financially, or through medical providers. Any contact attempt is harassment and coercion. Put that on record." The prosecutor nodded. Noted. Dorian's smile thinned. "You're overreacting to a business disagreement." Rose turned slightly toward his image, eyes steady. "You threatened my mother's medication access at 1:04 p.m. in Pellegrini Tower Logistics Corridor and repeated leverage language at 4:40 p.m. in South Loading Bay while forcing me toward an unmarked van." His jaw flexed. "You staged that scene." She opened the folder Ortiz had handed her and read from her own handwritten list. ink still damp at one edge. Your forged insurance correction packets referenced claim IDs ending 4431 and 7708. You used shell account Cade Urban Holdings to submit lien notices tied to my address and to 3 Florist vendor invoices that were never yours. Your assistant emailed me from alias domain kk-benefits.net with documents mislabeled as pharmacy authorizations. She looked up. I saved those files. On screen, Dorian's composure slipped a fraction. You signed documents. I signed one payment extension under duress in a parking lot with no copy provided. His attorney leaned toward him, whispering off mic. Dorian kept his eyes on Rose. You think they can protect you forever? The room went still. Ortiz glanced to the prosecutor, who said, Mr. Cade, that remark approaches intimidation. Choose your next words carefully. Dorian laughed once, too sharp. I meant legal protection. Don't dramatize. Lucian spoke for the first time since the recording began, voice low, controlled, and barely contained. You will not address her again unless a court compels it, and even then, through counsel. He did not raise his volume, yet every syllable landed like impact. She is under my protection, and she is not yours to corner, name, or threaten. Dorian looked at him with open contempt. Protection or possession? Lucian's expression did not change. Distinction is consent. She has it here. She never had it with you. Rose felt that sentence move through her like clean air after smoke. She leaned toward the microphone and finished what she had come to say. For the record, I am requesting a no-contact order, forensic review of all financial claims filed in my name, and protective routing for my mother's medical access. I will cooperate fully. I will not meet Mr. Cade privately under any condition. The prosecutor answered immediately. Request logged. Emergency petition will be filed tonight. Dorian started to speak again. His attorney touched his sleeve. This time he listened. The video feed cut 2 seconds later at the prosecutor's instruction. The red recording light stayed on while Ortiz summarized key points for confirmation. Rose signed each page with steadier handwriting than she expected. Rinaldi took the originals into an evidence envelope, read the seal number aloud, and had 2 witnesses countersign. When the last signature was done, Lucian stepped back to give her room, as if the room were finally hers. You set your boundary, he said quietly. Rose capped the pen and placed it on the table with deliberate care. Her arm hurt, her body still carried tremors. Fear had not vanished. Neither had the complicated pull of the man beside her, dangerous in reputation, meticulous in restraint. But Dorian's framework had cracked on record, in front of law and cameras and people who could not pretend they hadn't heard. I said it, she said. Now we keep it. I said it. Now we keep it. Rose's words settled over the conference room, and for the first time that day, no one rushed to fill the silence. Detective Ortiz clicked her pen closed, then reopened it as if she had made a decision. We keep it by closing loops tonight, she said. No loose evidence, no loose access, no loose narrative. Rinaldi stepped forward with his tablet. Screen already split into evidence logs. Item accountability, verbal confirmation on record, he said, glancing at Rose before he began. NFC tag recovered from suspect watch band, bagged at 1646, logged under chain ID 7A-119, now in financial crimes custody. Black Rose arrangement and matte ribbon recovered from South Bay and Service Corridor, both sealed for print and fiber analysis. Van interior photographed and processed. Crate, ties, and blankets in evidence transport. Your phone mirror extraction hashed and verified. Originals remain with you. Dispatch server alert from your employer matched to tower endpoint timestamps. Nina Alvarez's offline duplicate received and authenticated against primary logs. Corridor and bay video archived to court copy in cold storage. Rose let out a breath she had been holding since the loading bay. Procedure, spoken out loud, turned panic into sequence. "What about the valet?" she asked. Rinaldi's jaw shifted. "He gave a formal statement 15 minutes ago with counsel present. His name is Thomas Velez. He reported that an external contractor threatened his brother's debt file and told him to stall any Florist delivery matching your profile. That is why he kept looking at the hallway camera. He believed a surveillance contact was monitoring his compliance in real time." He paused. He did not know the full abduction plan. He knew enough to be afraid. Rose closed her eyes for one beat, remembering the stylus clicking against glass. He looked like he was waiting to be punished. He was, Ortiz said. Now he's under protective cooperation. Lucian remained beside Rose's chair, hands at his sides, voice low. "And the concierge in the main lobby?" Rinaldi answered without hesitation. "Interviewed. He confirmed he was instructed to route the Florist through guest-facing access instead of freight. Instruction came from a falsified internal email tied to a compromised vendor credential. He is suspended pending review. No criminal charge at this stage. The humiliations had been engineered, each one small enough to seem procedural, each one designed to isolate her. Rose felt anger rise clean and steady, not wild. She could use this. Ortiz turned to her. "I need one more decision tonight. Emergency hearing is in 30 minutes on remand, no contact, and asset freeze. You can appear by secure video and address impact in your own words, or I can proceed without your appearance." Rose looked at the microphone, then at Lucian. He did not answer for her, only held her gaze and waited. "I'll appear," she said. "No dramatics. Facts." By 8:13 p.m., she sat in a smaller hearing room with walnut walls and a single monitor mounted above eye level. Elena had replaced her damp dress with a plain black knit set from the house wardrobe and pinned her hair back with steady fingers while Mara re-wrapped her elbow. On screen, a night court judge reviewed filings. The prosecutor's face appeared in one pane, Dorian and his attorney in another. Dorian looked composed again, but there was strain at the corners of his mouth that hadn't been there before. The judge asked, "Ms. Lee, do you affirm your earlier statements and request emergency no contact?" Rose leaned toward the table mic. "Yes, Your Honor, I affirm. I request no direct or indirect contact through personal channels, work channels, medical providers, financial intermediaries, or third parties." Dorian's attorney started, "Your Honor, this is an interpersonal dispute inflated by..." The judge raised a hand. "Counsel, I have reviewed video from the secured loading bay and the recovered vehicle photos. Continue." The prosecutor moved briskly through exhibits. The 441 breach ping, the watch band tag transfer, forged lien filings, alias benefit emails, and Nina's matched backup copy. When Dorian objected to admissibility, the judge overruled pending full evidentiary hearing and set immediate conditions anyway. "Emergency no contact granted effective now," the judge said. "Defendant remanded pending formal arraignment due to intimidation risk and interference with medical access. Temporary freeze on identified shell accounts and lien enforcement. Pharmacy and insurer notified by court order. Witness protection coordination authorized." A sound escaped Rose's chest, almost a laugh and almost a sob. Dorian stared at her through the screen with that old polished contempt. But he said nothing. His attorney touched his sleeve again. This time, he stayed silent. When the feed ended, Ortiz exhaled hard for the first time all evening. That buys us time and structure. Rose nodded. Time is enough. Not just time, Ortiz said. Leverage. The next call came from Elmhurst Avenue Pharmacy on speaker, with court order number read aloud. The pharmacist, voice tired and precise, confirmed the override code had posted. Fraudulent authorization locks were removed, and Rose's mother could collect full refill quantities with ID. A representative from the insurer joined to verify that all contested correction forms were flagged as suspected coercion and suspended from action. Rose asked, "Say it plainly for me. He can't stop her medication now?" "Plainly," the pharmacist replied. "He cannot stop it." Only then did the shaking return, brief and fierce, then pass. Lucien moved closer, not touching. "Call your mother." Her mother answered in 2 rings. Rose put her on speaker so Ortiz could hear. "The court order went through," Rose said. "Your meds are protected. Tomorrow morning, a detective liaison and 1 medical advocate will meet you at the pharmacy. You won't be alone." Her mother cried quietly, then steadied herself. "Did you eat?" Lucien looked away toward the window. Ortiz hid a faint smile behind her hand. Rose laughed for real this time, small but true. "I ate enough. I'm coming home after paperwork." "Not tonight," Lucien said gently, now looking directly at Rose. "Secure residence first. Home visit tomorrow under escort." Rose met his eyes, considered, then nodded. "Not tonight. Tomorrow with escort." By 10:05 p.m., 3 final signatures remained. A victim advocate consent form, a protective lodging agreement that stated in clear language she retained movement rights with security coordination, and a financial injunction packet listing every known forged lien. Lucien's counsel slid 1 additional folder across the table. "This is separate," he said. "A private commercial offer from Mr. Moretti. You may ignore it." Rose opened it. Lease transfer assistance for the flower shop's adjacent unit. Equipment financing at 0 interest through a legal foundation grant. Ownership registered solely to Rose Mina Lee Floral, not to Moretti Holdings. Advisory clause optional. Exit clause unilateral to her. She looked up sharply. "Why now?" Lucien answered himself. "Because dependency is how men like him rebuild control. I am not rebuilding anything on that model." "And if I say no?" "Then no." She read every page while Elena brought tea, and Nina, escorted through 3 checkpoints and visibly furious at all of Manhattan, was finally allowed into the room. Nina hugged Rose with careful pressure around the bruise, then dropped into the nearest chair and glared at Lucien like he was a weather front she intended to monitor personally. "I brought your market keys and your backup apron," Nina said. "Also, Pavel is cooperating now the detectives explained perjury." Rose blinked. "He talked?" "Like a faucet. Turns out he got paid to reroute your dispatch and keep you front-facing." Nina lifted a brow. He is suddenly very civic-minded. Ortiz confirmed it. His statement supported conspiracy counts. By the 2nd morning after the hearing, rain had finally cleared. Queens smelled like wet concrete warming in thin sun as Rose stood at the wholesale market incinerator with Ortiz, Nina, and 2 evidence techs. The black roses, now brittle at the edges, sat in a sealed burn bin beside the matte ribbon and counterfeit cards. Ortiz gave Rose one last look. "Once this starts, these specific physical exhibits are destroyed per release order. Lab photos and reports remain." Rose touched the bin lid, cold metal under her palm. "Burn them." Flame took quickly, petals collapsing inward into glowing ash. No ceremony, No speech, just heat and finality and the low mechanical hum of the unit, doing what it was built to do. Nina squeezed Rose's shoulder once and kept her hand there until the chamber went dark. That afternoon, in a narrow office above the shop, Rose signed the expansion papers with an independent attorney chosen by the victim advocate, not by Lucian's team. She signed the court-voided debt notices next, each stamped null. She signed payroll forms for 2 new hires Nina had already interviewed. Every signature felt like reclaiming a square of ground. When she came downstairs, Lucian waited by the cooler doors in a dark coat, expression unreadable, until she stepped close enough to see the exhaustion he carried under control. The market noise moved around them. Pallet wheels, shouted stem counts, someone arguing about peony grades. "It's done," she said. "This case is done," he corrected quietly. "My world still has weather." "So does mine." He held her gaze. "I can offer protection. I cannot offer a harmless life." "I'm not asking for harmless." Rose adjusted the strap of her bag, shoulders straight. "I'm asking for honesty, consent, and room to keep my own name." "You have all 3. She considered him for a long second, then nodded toward the alley exit, where late light cut across wet pavement. "Walk me to the pharmacy. My mother's pickup window starts in 20 minutes. Lucian extended his arm, not possessive, not ceremonial, simply there if she wanted it. Rose took it with open eyes. Guards followed at distance, close enough to intervene, far enough to leave them breath. The city was still sharp-edged, and safety would always require maintenance. But as they stepped into the cooling evening together, fear was no longer the hand directing her life.